We are joined tonight by someone that we want to honor. He is a personal mentor of mine. He is the Reverend William Barber from North Carolina. And I want to tell you this about him. I got to know Reverend Barber in two ways. One, through his Moral Monday movement that he sparked in North Carolina that lit up the imagination of our country around rights and justice and liberation. And also, because when the abortion rights battle was going down, I called him and he said, "Where are we going to get arrested?" And we showed up and we showed out and we said, "Look, if the laws aren't in favor of the people, then we will not comply." And that's the kind of energy and spirit he brings to everything, centered on justice and liberation for all, period and without exception. So y'all please give a warm welcome to the one, the only, Reverend William Barber.
Hello, Human Rights Organization and Human Rights Center. Can you give me some more on this mic? Can I ask everybody in the room if you would just take a seat for a second? I know we're glad to be back out of COVID precautions, but I'm from the South, and the South says when your president like Kelly is speaking, don't be rude. So we're gonna ask everybody to take a seat. I won't be long before you. I want to ask everybody in this room, you know, I didn't always pay attention to it, but for some years ago they told me I'd never walk again, and I want you to be mindful of ADA. One reason I'm not on the stage is I'm not fussing, I'm just saying be mindful of ADA. You know, because we say we care, we got to care. Right now, and I tell people this in every convention I go to, ADA people couldn't get through any of these spaces with chairs, and our love and compassion has to be for everybody. Amen. And then I don't normally leave, but I'm still pastoring until June 18th. I told Kelly I would come, and not to get an award, but to be with you all, and I wish we could stay, but we've got to get out and get on a plane back to Goldsboro, North Carolina. The second thing, before I say anything, have you spoken to your server tonight? You know, people in the restaurant business during COVID and even before, they only make $2.13 an hour plus tip. Most restaurant people in restaurant and in the food industry couldn't even qualify for COVID relief because they didn't make enough base money. So tonight, when these servers come in, don't let them be just like that lady on Charlie Brown, walk, 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 walk. It got mighty quiet. Nobody clapped for the servers, you know. Make sure you get their name. Don't let people serve you food and you don't know their name. And just take a moment and be in community. Kelly, I'm honored today to receive this award on behalf of Repairers of the Breach and the new Center for Public Policy and Public Theology, the Forward Together Moral Movement, and the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival that I co-chair with Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. And I'm glad to receive it not on my behalf, but on behalf of all those who struggle today and who see that our work for justice is deeply connected. In 1965, on the steps of the Alabama State House, after the Selma to Montgomery March, about 42 minutes before Viola Woosa, a white woman, was shot down and killed while taking black marchers back to Selma with the FBI informant in the car. Dr. King had told the people, let me tell you why voting rights is not just a black issue. He said, during the populist movement of the 18th, 19th century, the greedy Southern oligarchy segregated Southern minds from honest thinking. They segregated the Negro from everything. That's why what happened when the poor Negro and the masses of poor white people in the South threatened to unite and build a great society to shift the economic architecture of the nation. He said, you must know, and Kelly and I, we talk about this all the time, that the greatest fear of the racist, greedy, divisive aristocracy and their masses, their greatest fear is for the masses of poor and low-wealth black people and white people and gay people and straight people and Asian and Latinos and to join together, and indigenous people, and to build a massive political power base that could fundamentally shift the economic architecture of the nation. If we're going to come back from COVID, we need to come back with some understanding that the tactics of fear that we are seeing today have their roots in the states' rights movement that began before the Civil War, with the fight for laws to maintain slavery and block women's suffrage. The Confederates militarized it. The KKK added to violence. Plessy versus Ferguson legalized it. It was picked up and mobilized and continued by Woodrow Wilson and Strom Thurmond and Barry Goldwater and continued by George Wallace. It was made a Republican Southern strategy by Kevin Phillips and Lee Atwater and Pat Buchanan. Ronald Reagan picked it up. George Bush picked it up. Donald Trump merely charismatized it and pushed it with media savvy and invested in it billions of dollars, but his billions only came after the Koch brothers had already done it. And now it has the backing of greedy elites and politicians like Mitch McConnell and McCarthy. We need to understand that what we're seeing is not just Trumpism. In a real sense, what we're seeing is the same thing you see when you get a cold. That runs out your nose is not the cold. It is the symptom. We are seeing the symptom. The truth of the matter is, in 1968, Kelly, Pat Buchanan and Kevin Phillips and others went to Richard Nixon and said, we know how to win in this country, but it's going to be risky. We got to engage in something called positive polarization. You can read about it in a book called The Time of Illusion by Jonathan Schnell. He quotes them as saying, what we must do is use the animosity against the civil rights movement, the war movement, the workers' movement, the gay movement, and the women's movement, and the poverty movement, and split the nation. They said it might get out of control, but if we do it just right, we can split the nation and we can control all of the southern states from Maryland all the way to Arizona, and we can control certain ethnic conclaves in the north and in the Midwest. They said splitting the nation would be a political strategy in 1968. And they said if we do it right, we can control state houses. We can at any time control 33% of the Congress. We can control the presidency, and we can run this game for at least 60 years. 1968, when they began, 60 years. That's what we are facing today. The same politicians that divide, once they get elected, they use their power to block living wages, to block health care, to block rights for the LGBTQI families. They treat corporations like people and people like things. It's all a part of the division. And who else is behind this? The religious nationalists. Dr. King would say even the moderates. Dr. King said the moderates were the greatest enemies of the civil rights movement because they were more interested in order than they were justice. And today, the moderates that are more interested in cute words than cutting-edge public policy. And if you trace the record of all these dividers, they are doing everything they can to block any growth and any real change in systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, the militarization of our communities and the war economy, the false moral narrative of religious nationalism, and they're doing everything they can to block curtailing the violence, public policy violence against our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQI community. And what has this division gotten us, Kelly? Well, prior to COVID, it got us 140 million people in this country living in poverty. 43% of the nation, 52% of our children 66 million white people, 73 million women, 26 million black people. What did it get us? It got us 87 million people without health care or underinsured. It got us 55 million people working for less than a living wage. It got us an America where you cannot work a living wage job in any county in this country and afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. What did it get us? It got us 1/3 of all poor people living in the South. What did it get us? It has gotten us to the place that just 2 weeks ago, a study came out that said that poverty is now the 4th leading cause of death in America, higher than homicide, higher than diabetes, higher than strokes, higher than respiratory disease. This is what intentional positive polarization has gotten us. And it has gotten us more voter suppression attempts today than we have seen since Jim Crow. And so in essence, this division has weaponized public policy until today we can say flat-footed, we have going on in this country policy murder. Not manslaughter, where people are doing stuff and not knowing what the outcome will be, but policy murder and social murder, and knowing that these policies of economic inequality and civil rights inequality are not benign. And so what must we do? Well, Kelly, unite the fight. Unite the fight. We have to understand that we are in a time where the rejected, those who have been rejected, are being called upon by history now to lead a moral and political revival and revolution of love, truth, and justice in this nation. Those who have been rejected, people of every color and every creed and every sexuality and every immigration status, it is our calling now to build a movement with the folk up front first who are the face of the negative statistics. We must put a face on the pain, and we must put a movement in the streets and in the suites and in the courthouse. We must put a face on it, and we must do it now. The scriptures tell us in Psalms, the stone that the builders rejected has now become the chief cornerstone in the building of a new reality. Now the rejected, turn this up some, must take their rightful place as the builders of a new cornerstone. In 2013, they told us they couldn't do it when extremists took over the North Carolina State House. But for 4 years, we engaged in nonviolent moral action. We engaged in action in the street. We did civil disobedience. We did litigation. And we did voter mobilization. Who made up that crowd called Moral Monday? That crowd was gay, it was straight, it was young, it was old, it was trans, it was Asian, it was Latino, it was black, it was white, it was people of faith and people not of faith. It was even 16% of Republicans who were not Tea Party extremists, but they were Teddy Roosevelt and Lincoln Republicans. And in 4 years, we were the only southern state to send an extremist governor home. In 4 years, we were the only southern state to turn the Supreme Court to being a progressive Supreme Court. In 4 years, we were the only southern state to beat back the worst voter suppression bill that had been passed since Jim Crow. And when we went to court to beat that voter suppression bill, we did not file a bill just on behalf of black people, because voting rights is not just about black people. Voting rights is an attack on our democracy. It's an attack on women. It's an attack on children. It's an attack on the poor. It's an attack on working people. And so, my brothers and sisters, that's why we've got to have a moral movement today. And so, Kelly, I came with a plan. I want to suggest we hook up. We hook up. The Human Rights Center, Poor People's Campaign, Repairs of the Breach. I've already talked to Mary Kay at SEIU, George Gresham at SEIU 1199. I'm talking to 20-some other denominations. Why don't we hook up? In June, we're going to have the Moral Poverty Action Conference in D.C., and we're going to put a moral agenda before the nation that could not only save the nation morally, but would make sense monetarily. in the spring of 2024, why don't we hook up and have 30 simultaneous mass gatherings at state capitals across this country, simultaneously, the same day. Everybody in, nobody out. And then why not in June of 2024, we have the second mass poor people's low-wage workers moral march on Washington and to the poll. And we put impacted people up front. And we put 300,000 to 400,000 people in the street to put a face on all of the death being caused by bad public policy. But we also let them know from June until November, we coming. We coming for every state house. We coming for the Senate. We're coming for the presidency. Why don't we understand that now we have the power? I close here. I'm not coming with some pipe dream, because now the stones that the builders have rejected have the power. Did you know that 43% of every state, the voters are poor and low wealth? Did you know that in the states where the margin of victory for presidency was less than 3%, the voter of poor and low wealth people are 33%? Did you know that in North Carolina, it would only take 19% of poor and low wealth people, doesn't matter, gay, straight, white, black, it doesn't matter. If just 19% who didn't vote in the last election would vote, they could determine who sits in the Senate and who sits in the White House. Did you know it's only 7% in Georgia? Did you know it's only 4% in Florida? Did you know it's only 1% in Michigan? I suggest we stop complaining about DeSantis and send his hind parts home and let him think about what he's doing. It's time to take this nation to school with a moral movement made up of all of us. So I got a question. Has anybody in this room been rejected? Rejected because of your income, rejected because of your race, rejected because of your sexuality. Is there anybody in here been rejected? Rejected because of who you choose to love, rejected because of how you were born, rejected because of your color of skin, rejected because of your disability. Anybody in here known rejection? Well, there comes a time that enough of us have been rejected that we are now an army that can produce a revival, a revolution. We are the rejected. But in the Bible, there was a valley of dry bones. And God said, when you want to challenge the nation, go get the bones in the valley. Is there anybody in here that knows what it's like to be in the valley? Well, stand up on your feet. If you know what it's like to be rejected, if you side, if you know what it's like to be hurt, what would happen? What would happen if Latino hands joined progressive and faith hands and labor hands and the hands and Asian hands, Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands? What if all those hands link up together? We can produce a revival of justice in this nation. We've got the moral high ground and we've got the power at the ballot box. It's time for a moral revival. I'm telling you, it's time right now. This is our moment. Don't fear what you see. What you see is a problem, but we are the problem solver, because there comes a time in every generation that the stones that the builders rejected become the possibility of a brand new chief cornerstone. So COVID safe. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, since you've been rejected and I've been rejected, let's get together and revive the heart and the soul of this nation. Let's get together and show them what love looks like at the ballot box. Let's get together and show them what justice looks like at the ballot box. Let's get together and show them what truth looks like at the ballot box. Are you ready?